The stars stretched out like scattered diamonds across the black emptiness of space. In the middle of this vast darkness, a silver ship moved slowly through the void. The vessel was called the Infinite Mercy, and it belonged to the Galactic Survey Corps. Its mission was simple: find new worlds, study them, report back to the Council. Commander stood at the center of the bridge, her long fingers resting on the edge of her control panel. She was a species known for their scaled skin that changed colors with their emotions. Right now, her scales had turned a pale blue. She was worried. The ship had dropped out of hyperspace near an uncharted star system. 3 planets orbited a yellow sun. The second planet was a gas giant, useless for life. The first was too close to the sun, burning hot. But the third planet caught everyone's attention. Navigator worked at his station with 4 arms moving quickly across the controls. He was a species that looked something like a large insect with a gentle face. His compound eyes reflected the data scrolling across his screen. Commander said, his voice shaking slightly, "I have completed the planetary scan. You need to see this." Walked over to his station. The numbers on the screen made her scales flash orange with surprise. "That cannot be correct," she whispered. "Run the scan again." Ran the scan 3 more times. The results stayed the same. The planet registered as a Class 15. Science Officer Prill let out a small gasp from her station. She was young, barely 50 cycles old, with soft fur covering her small body. Her large ears flattened against her head in fear. "Class 15, Prill repeated. "Commander, the highest classification for a world with sapient life is Class 12. Class 15 means. It means the planet itself is trying to kill everything on it." Knew this well. Classifications measured how dangerous a planet was. Class 1 was a paradise world, safe and gentle. Class 5 had some predators and weather challenges. Class 10 was the limit for intelligent life to evolve. Anything above that was too hostile, too violent, too deadly. Class 15 meant gravity that could crush bones, atmosphere filled with corrosive gases, weather that could tear apart buildings, predators with no mercy, diseases that could kill in hours, radiation from the sun that burned through skin. No intelligent species had ever evolved on anything above Class 12. It was simply impossible. The universe had rules, and this was one of them. "Show me the details," ordered. Pulled up the full report. The planet had a gravity of 1 on the standard scale, which was actually within normal range, but everything else was wrong. The atmosphere contained a gas called oxygen at 21% concentration. Oxygen was highly reactive. It rusted metal. It fed fire. Breathing it over time could damage cells. Yet this planet had creatures breathing it every moment of their lives. The planet's axis was tilted, which meant it had seasons. Extreme seasons. Parts of the world froze solid for months while other parts burned under direct sunlight. Storms formed that could cover entire continents. Winds reached speeds that could throw vehicles through the air. The water on this planet, which covered 70% of its surface, was filled with salt and teemed with predators. Some of these predators had teeth that regrew constantly. Some had tentacles lined with venom. Some were so large they could swallow smaller ships whole. On land, the situation was no better. Predators hunted in packs using complex strategies. Plants had developed poisons and thorns to defend themselves. Insects carried diseases that had killed millions of creatures throughout the planet's history. And the radiation. The yellow sun constantly bombarded the surface with harmful rays. The planet's magnetic field and thin ozone layer provided some protection, but not enough. Creatures on this world lived under constant assault from their own star. "This world should be empty," Prill said quietly. "Nothing complex should survive there. Maybe some bacteria, maybe some simple plants, but nothing more." Agreed, but the sensors were showing something else, something that made her scales turn white with shock. Commander said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am detecting energy signatures on the northern continent, artificial energy signatures." The bridge went completely silent. Artificial energy meant technology. Technology meant intelligence. Intelligence meant that somehow, against all odds, against every law of nature, something had evolved on this nightmare world. Something had not only survived but had built a civilization. "Launch a probe," ordered. "I need visual confirmation." The probe shot down toward the planet's surface. It passed through violent storms that nearly destroyed it. Lightning struck its shields. Winds pushed it off course. But the probe was built strong and it reached the surface intact. What it showed them changed everything. Cities, massive cities spread across the landscape. Buildings reached toward the sky. Roads connected settlements that stretched for miles. Vehicles moved along these roads, carrying passengers. Lights glowed in the darkness as the planet rotated away from its sun. And the creatures. The probe captured images of bipedal beings walking through these cities. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, and soft skin with no scales, no shells, no natural armor at all. They looked fragile. They looked weak. But they were everywhere. Billions of them, according to the probe's estimates. Billions of these soft, unprotected creatures living on a world that should have killed them all. "They are carbon-based," Prill reported, studying the data. "DNA structure similar to other known species. But Commander, the analysis is clear. They did not come from somewhere else. They evolved here. This planet is there." Stared at the images of these impossible beings. They walked through rain that would have sent a running for shelter. They swam in oceans filled with predators. They lived at the base of mountains that spewed fire and ash. And they smiled. The probe caught images of them baring their teeth at each other, which the translation software identified as a gesture of happiness. They were happy, living on a Class 15, and they were happy. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," finally said. "Priority 1. Tell them we have discovered a new sapient species, and tell them," she paused, still trying to believe what she was seeing. "Tell them these creatures call their world Earth, and somehow, impossibly, they call it home." The message raced across the stars at faster-than-light speeds. Within hours, the entire galaxy would know about humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Galactic Council moved faster than it had moved in centuries. Within 3 days of receiving Commander's message, they had assembled a first contact team and sent them racing toward the Sol system. Ambassador of the Diplomatic Corps led the team. She was considered one of the finest diplomats in the galaxy, known for her calm nature and her ability to understand alien minds. She had successfully negotiated peace between 17 different species. She had prevented 3 interstellar wars. She had never failed a mission. But as her shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, she began to wonder if her perfect record was about to end. The shuttle shook violently as it hit a wall of turbulence. Warning lights flashed across every console. The pilot, a nervous named, fought with the controls as winds tried to tear them apart. "Ambassador," called out over the screaming alarms, "the wind speed is exceeding safe limits. I recommend we abort and return to orbit." "Negative," replied, gripping her seat with both hands. "The Council wants contact made. Continue descent." Lightning struck the shuttle's shields. The whole vessel spun sideways before regained control. Rain hit the windows so hard it sounded like weapons fire. Through the chaos, caught glimpses of dark clouds stretching to the horizon. "Is this a storm?" she asked the shuttle's computer. "Negative, Ambassador. Current weather conditions are classified as partly cloudy with light rain. This is considered mild weather for this region." Felt her stomach drop. This was mild. This terrifying, violent descent through screaming winds and attacking lightning was considered a nice day on Earth. The shuttle finally broke through the clouds and approached a coastal city. According to their research, this city was called It sat on the edge of a massive body called an ocean. Millions of humans lived there. They landed on a flat area near the city's edge. The shuttle's landing gear sank slightly into ground that was soaked with rain, ran a final check of the atmospheric readings. Oxygen at 21%, he reported. Nitrogen at 78%. Various trace gases including something called carbon dioxide. The air is breathable but will feel uncomfortable. Also, the local gravity is slightly higher than standard. You may feel heavier than normal. Nodded and gathered her team. Besides, she had brought 3 assistants and 2 security officers. All of them were scared. She could see it in their eyes in the way they held themselves. But they were professionals and they followed her out of the shuttle. The first thing noticed was the weight. The planet's gravity pressed down on her shoulders like invisible hands. Every step took more effort than it should have. The second thing she noticed was the wind. It pushed against her body, nearly knocking her over. Her robes whipped around her legs. She had to shield her eyes with one hand just to see. The third thing she noticed was the smell. The air was thick with 1,000 different scents. Salt from the ocean, plants from nearby gardens, something cooking in the distance. It was overwhelming, almost dizzying. And then she noticed the humans. A group of them approached from the city. They walked easily through the wind that was making stumble. They wore light clothing despite the weather. They moved with a casual grace that suggested they found nothing unusual about any of this. One human walked at the front of the group. She was smaller than the others, with black hair cut short and eyes that curved upward at the corners. Her skin was a warm brown color, and when she saw his team, she smiled. Flinched. The human's smile revealed rows of white teeth, flat in front but pointed at the sides. On any other species, barring teeth was a threat display, but the human's eyes were warm, friendly. "Hello," the human said in perfect galactic standard. "Welcome to Earth. My name is, I have been appointed as your liaison." Blinked in surprise. "You speak our language." "We learned it from your transmissions," explained. "We have been listening to galactic communications for about 50 years now. It took us a while to decode everything, but we got there eventually." 50 years. They had learned an entirely alien language in 50 years, just from intercepted signals. Filed that information away for later concern. "Thank you for welcoming us," said formally. "I am ambassador of the Diplomatic Corps. We come in peace, representing the Galactic Council." "We figured," said, still smiling. "The big ship in orbit kind of gave it away. Come on, you all look tired. Let's get you inside before the weather gets bad." Before the weather gets bad. Looked at the howling wind, the dark clouds, the sheets of rain sweeping across the landing area. This was not bad weather. They followed toward a large building near the shore. Along the way, watched the humans around them. Children played in puddles, splashing each other and laughing. Adults walked without umbrellas, letting the rain soak their clothes. An old man sat on a bench, reading something on a small electronic device, completely unbothered by the wind. "Do your people not notice the storm?" asked. Looked up at the sky as if seeing the weather for the first time. This is not a storm. This is just Tuesday. You should see what a real storm looks like." Decided she never wanted to see what a real storm looked like. Inside the building, the environment was much more controlled. The temperature was comfortable. The air was filtered and clean. Steam visibly relaxed. Led them to a large room with soft chairs and a table covered with food. "Please, sit down. You must be hungry after your journey. We prepared some refreshments." Looked at the food with suspicion. There were plants, which seemed safe enough. But there were also strange substances she did not recognize. And in the center of the table, there was something that looked disturbingly like cooked animal flesh. "What is that?" one of her assistants asked, pointing at the meat. "Beef," answered. "It comes from cows. They are animals we raise for food." "You eat other animals. The assistant's voice was high with shock. Of course, humans are omnivores. We eat plants and animals. Is that not common in the galaxy? Thought about the gentle who ate only synthesized nutrients. She thought about the who consumed only certain types of algae. She thought about her own people, who carefully cultivated harmless fungi for food. No, she said quietly, it is not common at all. Tilted her head, that strange smile still on her face. Well, you do not have to eat anything you are not comfortable with. We have plenty of options. We just want you to feel welcome. Welcome? On a class 15, the humans wanted them to feel welcome. Sat down slowly, her mind racing. These creatures ate other creatures. They walked through storms without shelter. They had taught themselves an alien language in 5 decades, and they did all of this while living on a planet that was actively trying to kill them every single day. Tell me about your world, said carefully. Tell me about Earth. Smile widened. How much time do you have? Because Earth has a lot of stories to tell. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. The rain fell harder. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the sky. And just laughed. See, I told you, the weather is getting interesting now. Had never been more terrified in her entire life. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of learning about humanity, and Ambassador still could not sleep properly at night. Every day brought new horrors. Every conversation revealed another impossible truth about these soft-skinned creatures who had conquered a world that should have destroyed them. Today, a human named was showing them the ocean. Was a marine biologist, which meant his job was to study the creatures that lived in Earth's massive bodies of water. He was tall with broad shoulders and a face that always seemed to be smiling. He treated the ocean like an old friend. The ocean looked like death itself. They stood on a boat, floating on water that was dark blue and endless. Waves rocked the vessel back and forth. The salt in the air stung his throat, and below them, according to, lived some of the most terrifying creatures in the galaxy. This area is home to several species of sharks, explained cheerfully. He showed them images on a portable screen. The creatures had streamlined bodies, cold eyes, and mouths filled with more teeth than could count. They are apex predators, very efficient hunters. And you swim with them? Asked, his 4 arms wrapped tightly around himself. Sometimes, yes, for research. Shrugged like this was the most normal thing in the world. You just have to stay calm. Sharks can sense fear. If you panic, they might think you are prey. They have 300 teeth, said flatly. How does one stay calm near something with 300 teeth? Laughed. It was a warm sound, completely genuine. Practice, I suppose, and understanding. Sharks are not evil. They are just doing what sharks do. Once you accept that, being near them becomes easier. The boat rocked harder as a wave passed beneath them. In the distance, saw something break the surface of the water. A fin, large and cutting through the waves. Oh, look, said with excitement. There is one now. Beautiful, is she not? Beautiful was not the word would have chosen. Later that day, they visited a place called a zoo. Had suggested it as a way to understand Earth's wildlife. Wished she had refused. The zoo contained creatures from all over the planet. Each one seemed more dangerous than the last. There were enormous cats with muscles like coiled springs and claws that could tear through metal. There were bears, massive animals that stood twice the height of a human and weighed as much as a small vehicle. There were snakes with venom that could kill in minutes and crocodiles that had remained unchanged for millions of years because they were already perfect killing machines. You keep these creatures in cages, observed, but you also keep some in your homes. How do you decide which animals are safe to live with? Thought about the question. It depends on the animal. Dogs and cats have lived with humans for thousands of years. We have bred them to be companions. They protect us, and we take care of them. Dogs are descended from wolves, added. Wolves are pack hunters, very dangerous in the wild, But somehow, thousands of years ago, humans and wolves formed a partnership. Wolves helped humans hunt. Humans shared their food and shelter. Over time, wolves became dogs. Stared at him. You took a wild predator and turned it into a friend. We do that a lot, admitted. Humans bond with things. Sometimes those things try to kill us at first, but we are patient. We keep trying. Eventually, most creatures realize we are not so bad. This was perhaps the most terrifying thing Ed learned. Humans did not just survive predators. They befriended them. They looked at something with claws and teeth and thought, I want that to love me. And somehow, impossibly, they made it happen. That evening, they gathered for dinner. The humans had prepared a meal that included meat, vegetables, and something they called rice. Had slowly gotten used to watching humans eat flesh. It still made her uncomfortable, but she understood it was necessary for their survival. What she could not get used to was the fire. Humans cooked their food using open flames. They had a device in the kitchen that produced fire on command. They controlled it, fed it fuel, and used it to transform raw ingredients into meals. They did this every day, multiple times a day, without any apparent concern. Fire destroys, said as she watched work in the kitchen. It consumes everything it touches. How can you use it so casually? Adjusted the flame beneath a pan. Fire is just a tool. Like anything else, it can be dangerous if you are careless. But if you respect it and control it, fire is incredibly useful. Cooking food kills parasites and bacteria. It makes nutrients easier to absorb. Fire is one of the reasons humans survived. Your world created you to need fire to survive. Our world created us to adapt, corrected. Every challenge Earth threw at us, we found a way around it. Fire, tools, clothing, shelter. We could not change ourselves, so we changed everything around us instead. After dinner, showed them something called a documentary about human evolution. Watched with growing amazement as the story unfolded. Humans had once been prey animals, small, weak, unable to compete with the larger predators of their world. But they had one advantage. They could run. Not fast, not for short bursts, but steadily, for hours and hours without stopping. This was called persistence hunting. Early humans would chase prey across the hot African plains. The prey would sprint away, but humans would follow. The prey would run again, and humans would follow again. This would continue for hours until the prey collapsed from exhaustion and overheating. Then the humans would make the kill. They had sweated. It seemed disgusting, this ability to leak water through their skin, but it had saved them. Sweating allowed humans to regulate their body temperature while their prey overheated. It was a biological advantage that had turned a weak species into unstoppable hunters. You chased animals until they died from exhaustion, repeated slowly. That is how you hunted. It is how we survived, said. Earth was not kind to us, so we became something Earth could not stop. Thought about this as she lay in her quarters that night. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the city. Humans lived in the darkness without fear. They walked streets lit by artificial light. They built towers that reached toward the sky. They filled the oceans with ships and the air with flying machines. They had taken a Class 15 and made it their home, not by being the strongest or the fastest or the most dangerous. They had done it by being the most stubborn, by refusing to give up, by looking at every challenge and saying, I will find a way. For the first time since arriving on Earth, felt something other than fear. She felt respect. These strange, soft, fragile creatures were not weak at all. They were survivors, and was beginning to understand that the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Humanity was about to change everything. The Galactic Council chamber was chaos. Representatives from 200 species shouted over each other, their voices blending into a storm of fear and confusion. Ambassadors' report had spread across the galaxy like a disease, and everyone had an opinion about what should be done. Hymora, an ancient with skin like cracked stone, pounded his staff against the floor for silence. The noise slowly died down. "We must make a decision," Mara announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The humans are a new factor in galactic affairs. We cannot ignore them." Representative Goss of the consortium rose to speak. His people were known for their cautious nature, always planning for the worst possibility. "The humans are clearly dangerous. They evolved on a Class 15. They eat other creatures. They have a history of violence against their own kind. I propose we quarantine their system, prevent them from ever reaching the stars." A wave of agreement rolled through one section of the chamber, but another representative stood up in opposition. "Quarantine will not work," said Trade Master Yell of the Merchant Guild. She was a small creature with quick eyes and quicker hands, always calculating profit and loss. "The humans are already listening to our transmissions. They know we exist. If we try to imprison them in their own system, they will see us as enemies. Do we really want to make enemies of creatures like that?" "Then what do you suggest?" Goss demanded. Yell smiled, showing teeth that were thankfully flat and harmless. "I suggest we make them partners. Humans can survive anywhere. They can eat anything. They will work in conditions that would kill any other species. Imagine the possibilities: mining operations on toxic worlds, construction in high-gravity environments, emergency rescue in the most dangerous situations." "You want to use them as tools," another representative said with disgust. "I want to benefit from their strengths while giving them something they want," Yell corrected. "Trade, partnership, integration, it is better than war." The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted to welcome humanity. Others wanted to destroy them before they could become a threat. A few suggested simply waiting to see what the humans would do on their own. But while the council argued, humanity was not waiting. On Earth, a brilliant engineer named was taking apart an alien translator. Ambassador had left behind some equipment during the first contact mission, and the humans had collected every piece. Now and her team were studying it, learning from it, improving upon it. "The power efficiency is terrible," muttered, examining a circuit with a magnifying device. "I can make this 30% better with existing Earth technology." Her assistant, a young man named, looked up from his own work. 30%? That would mean we could make our own version with smaller batteries, portable translators for everyone. "That is the idea," smiled and made a note on her tablet. "These aliens have been traveling between stars for thousands of years, but their technology is not as advanced as I expected. Different, yes, based on principles we have not discovered yet, but once we understand those principles, we can combine them with what we already know." This was happening across the planet. Human scientists studied every piece of alien technology they could find. Human linguists analyzed galactic languages and found patterns that made learning easier. Human engineers began designing ships based on the basic principles of faster-than-light travel that they had extracted from intercepted communications. Ambassador watched all of this from the human facility where she was staying. She sent regular reports back to the council, each one more alarming than the last. "They learn too fast," she wrote in one message. "A task that took my people 300 years, these humans completed in 18 months. They do not just copy what they find, they improve it, they adapt it, they make it their own." The council received her warnings but could not agree on a response. Meanwhile, humanity kept advancing. 1 year after first contact, a human ship left Earth's atmosphere under its own power. It was not elegant like galactic vessels. It was rough, practical, covered in heat shields and backup systems. But it worked. Humans had built a working spacecraft in 12 months, starting from almost nothing. 3 years after first contact, that same ship's design had been improved 17 times. The version could travel between planets in days instead of weeks. 5 years after first contact, a human named stood before the Galactic Council itself. She had come alone, without escorts or guards. She wore simple clothes and spoke with a calm confidence that made the council members uncomfortable. She was neither aggressive nor submissive. She simply stood there, one human among hundreds of aliens, and waited for her turn to speak. "The human representative may address the council," High Mora announced. Stepped forward. She was middle-aged, with streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that suggested she had smiled a lot in her life. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "Thank you for allowing me to speak. I know many of you are afraid of humanity. I understand why. Our history is violent. Our world is dangerous. We eat meat and use fire and have done terrible things to each other over the centuries." She paused, looking around the chamber. "But we have also done wonderful things. We have created art that moves people to tears. We have composed music that touches something deep inside us. We have written stories about love and hope and sacrifice. We have fought wars, yes, but we have also made peace. We have hurt each other, but we have also healed each other. The question before this council is simple. What should you do about humanity? Some of you want to contain us. Some want to use us. Some want to destroy us before we become a threat." Shook her head slowly. "You cannot contain us. We have already built our own ships. Soon we will have faster-than-light travel whether you help us or not. You cannot use us without our consent. We will work with partners, but we will not be slaves. And you cannot destroy us. We survived a Class 15. We have faced extinction 100 times and refused to die. Do you really think your weapons will succeed where our own planet failed?" The chamber was completely silent. "Humanity is coming to the stars," continued. "That is no longer a question. The only question is how. Will we come as friends, as partners, as members of your galactic community? Or will we come as outsiders, suspicious of everyone, trusting no one?" She spread her hands in a gesture of openness. "We would prefer to come as friends. Humans are social creatures. We form bonds. We build relationships. We love deeply and loyally. Those we call family, we will protect with our lives. And we are willing to consider all of you as potential family. But make no mistake, if you choose to be our enemies, we will treat you as enemies. We will fight you with everything we have. And we will not stop until one side has won completely. That is also who we are." Bowed her head slightly. "The choice is yours. We hope you choose wisely." She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving 200 species in stunned silence. 3 days later, the Galactic Council voted. It was not even close. By a margin of 173 to 27, they voted to offer humanity full membership in galactic society. The 27 who voted against formed their own coalition. They called themselves the Purity Alliance, and they swore that one day they would deal with the human threat. But that day was not today. Today, humanity had won their place among the stars. The real test was yet to come. 20 years had passed since first contact. Humanity had spread across the galaxy like seeds carried by the wind. They built colonies on worlds that others considered uninhabitable. They took jobs in mines and factories and rescue operations where the conditions were too harsh for other species. They traded, explored, and made friends wherever they went. And they remembered everyone who had helped them along the way. Ambassador, now retired from diplomatic service, lived on a quiet world. She spent her days in her garden, growing flowers and thinking about the past. Sometimes she received visitors. Today, one of those visitors was very special. "Ambassador," the young woman said, bowing respectfully, "thank you for seeing me." Studied her guest with aged eyes. The woman was human, perhaps 30 years old, with the confident posture of someone who had seen much of the galaxy. Her name was, and she worked as a cultural liaison, helping different species understand each other. "Yuar's granddaughter," said. It was not a question. Smiled, and for a moment saw a smile in her face, that same warmth, that same openness. "Yes, she spoke of you often. She said you were the first alien to really try to understand us. I was terrified of your people, admitted. Everything about Earth horrified me. Your food, your weather, your predators. I could not understand how anyone could survive on such a world. And now was quiet for a long moment. Now I understand that survival was never your goal. Thriving was. You did not just survive Earth. You conquered it. And then you decided to conquer the stars. They talked for hours, sharing stories about the past 2 decades. Told about human colonies on harsh worlds, about the friendships humans had formed with dozens of species, about the growing network of trade and cooperation that now connected much of the galaxy. But she also told about the Purity Alliance. They have been building their forces for years, explained, her face growing serious. They are leading them now. They believe humans are a corruption, a disease that needs to be eliminated before we spread further. They were always arrogant, said. They believe they are the superior species because their world was gentle and their evolution was peaceful. They do not understand struggle. They are about to learn. The attack came 3 months later. The hierarchy, along with their allies in the Purity Alliance, launched a massive assault on human colonies. They struck without warning, believing that surprise would give them the advantage. They had studied human military history and concluded that humans were only dangerous when they had time to prepare. They were wrong. On the colony world of Nu, a fleet appeared in orbit and began bombarding the surface. They expected the colonists to panic, to flee, to surrender. Instead, the colonists fought back. Was a farmer. He grew vegetables on a rocky hillside and had never held a weapon in his life. But when the landed troops near his farm, he grabbed a harvesting tool and joined the other colonists in defending their home. Why do they not run? A commander asked, watching the colonists form a defensive line. They cannot win. Our forces outnumber them 10-1. His second-in-command had no answer. The humans should have surrendered. Any rational species would have surrendered. But the humans just kept fighting, kept pushing back, kept refusing to accept defeat. The answer was simple, though they could not understand it. Humans did not fight because they thought they could win. They fought because giving up was not in their nature. They had survived a class 15. They had endured ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have wiped them out. Surrender was simply not something they knew how to do. Within weeks, human reinforcements arrived. Not just military ships, but civilian vessels carrying volunteers from across human space. Doctors, engineers, pilots, ordinary people who had heard that their fellow humans were in danger and had dropped everything to help. And they were not alone. Ambassador watched the news reports with tears in her eyes. Ships from dozens of species were joining the Human Defense Force. The sent medical frigates. The sent cargo vessels loaded with supplies. Even some members of the Merchant Guild contributed ships and resources. Why? A human reporter asked the captain who had volunteered his ship for the relief effort. Why are you helping us? They might target your people next. The captain, an older male with scales that had faded to a soft gold, considered the question carefully. 20 years ago, a human saved my daughter's life, he said. She was trapped in a collapsed building on a mining station. The conditions were too dangerous for our rescue teams. The air was toxic, the structure was unstable. Everyone said it was impossible. He paused, remembering. But a human engineer named heard about the situation. He did not know my daughter. He had no reason to risk himself, but he put on a breathing mask, walked into that building and carried her out on his back. When I asked him why, he said, because she needed help. That is all the reason I need. The captain looked directly into the camera. That is why I am here. Because humans helped us when they had no reason to, because they made us family, and family protects family. The war lasted 6 months. The Purity Alliance had more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. But they could not match human determination, and they could not match the coalition of species that had gathered to support humanity. The final battle took place over a gas giant called Goliath 7. They had gathered their remaining fleet there, hopping for one last stand. The human admiral in command was a woman named, small and soft-spoken, but with eyes like cold steel. "Offer them surrender terms," ordered her communications officer. "Tell them they can go home if they lay down their weapons. No punishment, no revenge, just peace." "Admiral, they killed thousands of our people. They do not deserve mercy." Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mercy is not about what they deserve. It is about who we are. If we become monsters to defeat monsters, what have we won?" The offer was sent. To everyone's surprise, they accepted. Their fleet powered down their weapons and surrendered. The war was over. In the years that followed, humanity helped rebuild the worlds that had been damaged. They sent aid to planets that were struggling with the aftermath of defeat. When a plague broke out on the human doctors were among the first to volunteer for the relief effort. "Why?" the High Commander asked a human nurse who was treating his own sick child. "We tried to destroy you. Why do you help us?" The nurse, a young man named, adjusted his medical equipment and smiled. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "That is all the reason we need." 50 years after first contact, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Humanity was everywhere, not as conquerors but as partners, friends, family. They had brought something to the galactic community that it had never had before: a stubborn refusal to give up, a willingness to help anyone who needed it, a belief that every creature, no matter how different, could be part of something bigger. Ambassador died peacefully in her garden, surrounded by flowers from a dozen worlds. At her funeral, representatives from 100 species came to pay their respects. Humans and even a few stood together in the soft rain. Spoke at the ceremony, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Was the first to see us," she said. "Not as monsters or threats or problems to be solved. She saw us as people, flawed, yes, dangerous, yes, but also capable of kindness, of growth, of love. She gave us a chance." Looked up at the sky, where stars were becoming visible as night fell. 50 years ago, you found a Class 15 and humanity was already present. You could have destroyed us. You could have ignored us. Instead, you welcomed us. She smiled, that warm human smile that still made some aliens nervous, but had come to mean so much to so many. "Thank you for giving us the stars. We promise to take care of them." Above the garden, a formation of ships passed overhead. Human vessels and alien vessels flying together, a symbol of everything that had changed, everything that humanity had helped to build. The universe would never be the same. And that was exactly as it should be.